Maybe 120 days from now, you could find yourself exactly where you are today, unless you decide differently. Not some huge, dramatic decision, not an overnight life overhaul, just a small decision, made consistently every single day, even on the days you don't want to, especially on the days you don't want to. There is a Japanese idea the West has barely scratched the surface of. It's not Kaizen. It's not Ikigai. You won't find it printed on some motivational poster hanging in a corporate office. This concept is called Sekisho Idai. The literal meaning is simple, tiny accumulations produce remarkable outcomes. Sounds straightforward, right? You've probably encountered something similar before. I sense it. Yet there's a huge gap between understanding this and truly grasping what it signifies for your existence. Because the Japanese never viewed this concept as just a catchy slogan. They regarded it as an unbreakable law of existence. Much like gravity. You don't argue with gravity. You figure out how to work with it. And once you understand how to apply Sekisho Idai, along with the 4 principles that surround it, a shift occurs. Not just in your actions, but in your very identity. Today, you're going to learn how an ordinary individual, someone with no extraordinary gifts or unique advantages, can reshape their body, mind, career, and existence in just 120 days. You're going to discover how you too can begin transforming your life within that same time frame. And by the conclusion, you'll come to see why 120 days is not the ultimate goal. It is merely the initial rung on a ladder that stretches across a lifetime. And that is precisely what makes this path so worthwhile. Chapter 1. The day Chris stopped deceiving himself. I want to kick off this video by sharing Chris's story with you. You might see a bit of yourself in his experiences. Chris was 34 years old. He had his health. He had a place to live. He had some money in his bank account, though it wasn't much. But 3 months earlier, he had been let go from his job, and rather than taking action, he slipped into a state you're probably familiar with. The waiting state. He sent out resumes, binged TV shows, stayed up late, and woke up without any clear direction. He just kept repeating this cycle, as though time were some endless resource. Chris wasn't lazy in the usual sense. He was stuck. There's a difference. The lazy person simply doesn't want to move. The stuck person desperately wants to move, but has no idea which way to go. And that kind of uncertainty weighs heavier than any physical load. That was his reality until one Friday afternoon at 2 p.m., while scrolling on his phone, he came across an Instagram post. A guy named Marcus, also 34, living in the same city from the same background. Yet Marcus was thriving. Marcus had started a small software company, went for a run every morning, and seemed to possess something Chris was missing, a sense of purpose. Chris stared at Marcus's profile for about 4 minutes, then shut the app. He laid there, gazing at the ceiling, and the feeling that surfaced had a distinct form. It was recognition. The gap between him and Marcus was that Marcus was in forward motion, while Chris was stuck in neutral. Chris was aware of his problem and knew he had to act, but he had no clue that a concrete solution even existed. And this is the moment when a lot of people just give up entirely, convinced that their problem can't be fixed. They think they can't overcome laziness or procrastination, that they'll never change the course of their lives. At this stage, many surrender and accept a mediocre, unhappy existence. But while some accept defeat, people like you, tuning into this video, are searching for ways to tear down every barrier standing between you and the life you truly deserve. A life of victory. Just like Chris, you've decided to hunt for a solution. Chapter 2, the search that led to Alan. Over the next few days, Chris did what men in his situation often do. He dove into YouTube videos, Reddit conversations about restarting life after 30, podcasts covering habits, discipline, and productivity. He consumed a ton of material and applied nearly none of it, because the real issue wasn't a shortage of information. The world has never had so much information at its fingertips. The issue was that every piece of content promised a quick, obvious, and dramatic shift. And every time Chris tried and didn't witness instant outcomes, he saw it as a failure, and he would quit. Until one evening, he stumbled upon an old thread in a philosophy forum. Someone had left a remark about a Japanese idea he'd never come across before, Sekisho Idai. Small accumulations become great results. But what really grabbed Chris's attention wasn't the idea itself. It was the person behind the comment, the signature read, Alan Mercer, former Kyoto resident for 11 years, human performance consultant. Chris spent an hour going through everything he could track down by Alan. He wasn't some self-proclaimed guru. He didn't have a pricey online course. He didn't have a massive following. But what he wrote carried a certain weight. There were no quick fixes promised. Alan spoke about progress using stones as an analogy. He talked about accumulation, about the journey itself. Chris sent him a direct message. Simple. I read your thoughts on Sekisho Idai. I'm at a point where I really need to get a handle on this. 3 days passed before Alan replied. Just 4 words. When can we meet? They agreed to meet at a park. Alan was in his mid-50s, but he appeared far younger. There was no idle chit-chat. They exchanged greetings and got straight to the point. Alan looked directly at Chris and asked, "What did you do today that will still matter 120 days from now?" Chris drew a blank because he had no answer. Alan let the silence stretch. He allowed the question to sink in. Then he spoke. "I spent 11 years in Japan. I arrived there feeling just as lost as you. I knew something was off, but I didn't know a solution was possible. And what I uncovered there wasn't just a system. It was a fundamental law." Alan opened a notebook and jotted it down. "Sekisho Idai," he said. "The Japanese didn't create this concept. They simply had the insight to name what nature was already demonstrating. A mountain doesn't form from an eruption. It forms from layer upon layer, each one invisible by itself, yet the final outcome is undeniable. The challenge with modern man," Alan continued, "is that he anticipates a sudden blast. He wants the mountain to rise in 30 days, and when it doesn't happen, he assumes the effort failed. But what he fails to recognize is that he was already constructing just the wrong thing." Chris asked, "What do you mean by the wrong thing?" Alan closed the notebook. "Over the last 3 months, you've been depositing fragmentation, inconsistency, and passivity. Sekisho Idai functions in any direction. You are always piling something up. The real question is, what exactly? And this leads to the second biggest error we make when attempting to alter our habits. Most people don't realize that every action you take pushes you in a specific direction. It could be a positive direction or a negative one. For instance, if you eat fast food daily, you're accumulating poor food choices, and those choices will steer you somewhere. They might lead to a body you're unhappy with, to a more sedentary lifestyle. Do you see how everything you do guides you towards some outcome? Now, instead of piling up poor food choices, what if you accumulated better decisions? Like eating more quality protein, cutting back on processed foods, drinking more water, moving more throughout the day. Step by step, this will guide you toward a new life where you feel more energetic, more satisfied with your body, and have more drive to pursue your ambitions. Everything is a construction, so choose to build something that serves you." That's what Alan taught Chris during their second meeting. Chapter 3, Kaizen, but not the version you were sold. On their second meeting, Alan brought a notepad and wrote down the word Kaizen. Kaizen. You've heard this before. Get 1% better every day. Forget the 1%, he said. Don't fixate on the 1%. Chris was puzzled. But isn't that exactly what Kaizen means? Kaizen translates to continuous improvement. The word continuous is what's crucial, not the percentage. Alan explained. The West took Kaizen and reduced it to a numbers game. 1% daily, compounding results, exponential curves. Looks great on paper, but it falls apart in practice. Because people hear 1% and think, I need to track my progress. I need to see the growth. And when the curve doesn't rise as they anticipated, they abandon it. True Kaizen isn't really about improvement. It's about continuity. Consider this, he told Chris. One workout seems insignificant. One reading session seems insignificant. One walk seems insignificant. But 120 workouts and 20 reading sessions, 120 walks, that's a game changer. The objective isn't to improve by 1%, Alan said. The objective is to never break the chain. Chris paused for a moment. But what about when I don't feel like it? Alan grinned. That's exactly the moment that counts. And that brings us to the next idea you need to grasp. Here I want to highlight something. I've discussed the concept of Kaizen multiple times on this channel. We know Kaizen is about continuous improvement, but many people get caught up in metrics and results. Kaizen is ultimately about consistency. This means if you set a goal to read daily, and you began by reading 5 pages each day, you don't have to boost the number of pages every single day. Of course, over time you'll naturally want to read more, because it becomes a habit. So the focus should be on the routine, so that the habits become ingrained. For that to occur, you need to perform the same habit every day with consistency, not obsessing over numbers, but concentrating on discipline. Chapter 4. Ichigyo Zammai. The question the samurai asks. Now, let's tackle another critical point. Perhaps your struggle is different. Maybe it's a struggle with focus. Alan wrote in the notebook, Ichigyo Zammai. Complete focus on a single task. Modern man wakes up and thinks, how am I going to change my life? And he becomes overwhelmed by the sheer size of the question. The samurai wakes up and considers just one single thing. What do I need to accomplish today? Alan looked at Chris. Do you know what the greatest enemy of your 120 days is? It's not laziness. It's the scattering of your attention. You wake up and immediately reach for your phone to check feeds, news, messages. Your mind is already fractured at the start of the day, and a fractured mind doesn't accumulate anything. Ichigyo Zammai isn't just a productivity trick. It's a statement about where your focus will go first. For the first 90 minutes of your day, you commit to a single task. One, no phone, no news, no email. One task that advances the direction you've chosen. This sounds simple, but it's what will distinguish your 120 days from every other attempt you've made. Chris asked, what if something urgent pops up? Alan responded without pausing. Almost nothing is truly urgent in the real sense. What we label as urgency is usually other people's stress demanding our instant attention. The samurai didn't react to every distraction on the battlefield. He identified what was important and focused his strike. You're no different, except your battlefield is internal. What Alan was explaining to Chris has solid scientific support. Gloria Mark, a researcher at the University of California, Irvine, has spent over 15 years studying the impact of attention fragmentation. She found that after every digital interruption, it takes the human brain an average of 23 minutes to return to a deep state of focus. Considering the average phone is unlocked 96 times daily, a statistic tracked by IDC research, this implies that most people never actually reach a true state of deep focus. Not once. Not on any single day. Your surroundings are working against you. Remember this. Your environment molds you, so either you transform your environment, or it will forever shape you. Apply this to every part of your life. Approach each task with complete awareness. Put the phone aside and concentrate on the task directly before you. This isn't just a preference for quiet. It's the only logical response to a world built to divide your attention. Chapter 5, Ganbaru, what occurs on day 43. Chris began his transformation plan, and he started off exceptionally strong, much like most people do. He would wake up at 5:30 a.m. He exercised, he read, he worked in concentrated blocks. First week, high enthusiasm. Second week, the momentum was building. Third week, Chris experienced for the first time what every person trying to change inevitably encounters: the empty space. It was simply the depletion of emotional drive. The motivation had evaporated, and along with it, the sense that it was even worthwhile to continue. He called Alan. Alan listened thoroughly. Then he said, "You've arrived at the perfect place." Chris didn't follow. "There is a Japanese concept I reserved for this exact moment, because it only holds meaning when you're experiencing it. Ganbaru. Ganbaru doesn't mean triumphing. It doesn't mean achieving success. It doesn't mean being the best. Ganbaru means to endure through difficulty, to push forward against the odds. Nothing more." Alan continued, "Motivation is a deceptive resource. It appears at the start when everything is fresh, and it disappears precisely when you need it most. On day 43, motivation is absent. On day 68, motivation is absent. On day 91, motivation is absent. What remains is Ganbaru, the quiet decision to keep moving forward. Not because you feel inclined, but because you are the type of person who persists. That is the distinction between those who truly change and those who merely attempt to change. Most people who transform their lives don't possess superhuman willpower. The difference lies in the ability to operate without emotional fuel. We all face this turning point when the motivation fades and we lose the desire to keep going. This could be your brain's way of deceiving you, because the brain prefers you stay in your comfort zone, so it pushes you to conserve energy. It will try to make you more sluggish. Your body might feel heavier. You might feel drowsier during the day or more exhausted. That is precisely when your environment becomes everything. If this critical moment arrives, and your surroundings are messy and undisciplined, the likelihood of you reverting to old patterns is enormous, because everything will pull you back to what's familiar. So, make an effort to transform everything around you. And when you encounter that wall, remember Ganbaru. Chris fell quiet. "So, what do I do today?" he asked. "Exactly what you did yesterday," Alan replied. "Nothing more, nothing less." Chapter 6. Masashi's Teaching and the 1,000 Days. On their 5th meeting, Alan brought a book, Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest swordsman Japan ever produced, a man who never lost a single duel. Alan opened to a particular page and read aloud, "1,000 days to forge, 10,000 days to refine." He closed the book. Musashi wasn't discussing swords, Alan said. He was discussing anything truly worth building. 1,000 days to forge, that's about 3 years. 10,000 days to refine, that's nearly 30 years. Now tell me, Chris, if it requires 1,000 days to shape a warrior, what can 120 days achieve for you? The answer isn't nothing, but it's not everything either. The answer is enough to reveal who you're capable of becoming. 120 days construct the groundwork. They forge the neural patterns that will uphold everything that follows. They demonstrate to your own mind that you are someone who follows through. It took Musashi 1,000 days to forge. He didn't wake up on day 1,000 as a fully formed warrior. He woke up on day 1,000 knowing that the next phase could finally begin. Your 120 days are exactly that. The first day of a process that continues, as long as you choose to live with purpose. What Alan was sharing with Chris resonates directly with findings from modern neuroscience. Philip Ilali, a researcher at University College London, conducted a study tracking 96 participants over 12 weeks as they attempted to form new habits. The conclusion was definitive. New behaviors take an average of 66 days to become automatic, not the 21 days that self-help marketing has been promoting for years. If you follow this channel, you're already aware of this. 66 days. This means that during the first 2 months, you are literally constructing new neural connections. The brain is being physically reshaped, not metaphorically, physically. Roy Baumeister, a psychologist at Florida State University, studied what he termed ego depletion, the exhaustion of willpower. His conclusion: willpower is a limited resource that diminishes throughout the day. This explains why decisions made in the morning are vastly different from those made at night. And it explains why Ichigyo Zammai, placing your most important task at the very start of the day, isn't just a personal choice. It is a neurological tactic. Sekisho Idai is not some mystical knowledge. It is a precise description of how the human brain actually operates. Chapter 7. What happened to Chris? On day 47, Chris looked at himself in the mirror after his workout. It wasn't the body he ultimately wanted yet, but it was clearly different from what he had on day 1. On day 61, he submitted an application to a company that just a month prior he would have thought was completely beyond his reach, because his self-perception had changed. On day 78, motivation resurfaced. However, this time it was a different sort of motivation, quieter, more grounded. The motivation of someone who has seen tangible proof of their own resolve. On day 91, Alan asked him, "What has shifted within you?" Chris considered for a moment. "I no longer wait to feel ready to begin. I just start, and the feeling follows." Alan nodded. "That is Ganbaru in action. That is Sekisho Idai in motion. You didn't find motivation. You discovered something better. You discovered momentum." On day 120, Chris hadn't reached his ultimate goal, but he was no longer the person he used to be. And for the first time in a long while, he knew exactly where he was headed. But here's what most people overlook about Chris's journey and about their own. Day 120 wasn't a finish line. It was a reflection. Because in 120 days, you don't see the final outcome. You see the evidence that the process is effective. You see who you are when challenges arise. You see what you're capable of creating when you stop waiting for ideal conditions. And then something occurs that no one prepares you for. You realize you don't want to quit, because the process itself has gained significance. The workout is no longer just a way to achieve a certain body. The workout is part of your identity. The focus is no longer just a tool for your career. The focus is part of who you are. And then you grasp what the Japanese understood centuries ago. The joy isn't in the destination. The joy is in the accumulation. The joy is in the journey. This is Sekisho Idai in its most profound form. Chapter 8. The 120 days are the beginning, not the end. Alan told Chris in one of their last conversations, "In Japan, there is a way of understanding time that is very different from the West. The West views time as a straight line. You start at point A and need to reach point B. The value is placed on the arrival. Japan views time as a cycle. Each day is complete in itself. The value lies in the daily practice, not the final destination. There is no moment when a samurai looks in the mirror and says, 'Now I am done forging myself.' The forging is a lifelong work, and here is the paradox the West never grasps. Precisely because the process has no end, it can sustain meaning indefinitely. If there is a finish line, one day you cross it, and then what? Where do you go next? But if the process is life itself, if Sekisho Idai is the way you engage with the world, then every morning you wake up with a renewed sense of purpose. Not because the goal shifted, but because the path continues." Chris asked. Alan smiled. "You begin day 121, but you begin it differently because now you understand who you are when things get tough. And that is more valuable than any specific result these 120 days could ever offer you. So to ensure everything we've covered stays with you, let's quickly revisit a few essential points. The main idea of this video is Sekisho Idai. Small accumulations become great results, a natural law that the Japanese turned into a way of life. A mountain doesn't rise from a blast. It rises layer by layer, deposit by deposit, stone by stone. The first principle Alan introduced to Chris was Kaizen, but not as the corporate world markets it. It's not about getting 1% better. It's about never breaking the process, because 120 repetitions of anything will reshape the core of who you are. The second principle was Ichigyo Zammai, complete focus on a single task. Modern man asks how he will change his life. The samurai asks what he needs to do today. This difference in mindset is exactly the gap between paralysis and action. The third principle was Ganbaru, to keep pressing forward despite the struggle. On day 43, motivation fades. On day 68, it vanishes once more. On day 91, it drops again. Ganbaru is what remains when motivation departs. It is the quiet decision to be the person who stays the course. And Masashi taught us that 1,000 days forge a warrior. If 1,000 days are needed to forge, what can 120 days accomplish for you? The answer? Build the foundation. Prove to your own mind that you are someone who persists. And the most important takeaway of all, 120 days will change something within you. That is certain. But 120 days are not the final stop. They are the first step on a staircase that stretches across a lifetime. And the joy, the real joy, is in the journey. It's in the process. It's in accumulating day after day the small stones that will eventually become mountains. You need to be in motion. Being in motion will bring you peace. Chris understood this on day 120, and you can understand it right now. The question that remains isn't what will you achieve in 120 days. The question is who will you choose to become? Because achievements may fade, character remains. And every single small stone you lay down from this moment forward will contribute to a mountain that only you can build. Sekisho Idai. Small accumulations become great results. Start today, not tomorrow. Today with one stone, just one. If this video resonated with you, if you felt this was precisely what you needed to hear, then I have a request. Subscribe to the channel right now and hit the notification bell. Every week there's new content here grounded in Japanese philosophy applied to everyday life, without superficiality, empty promises, or magic formulas. Also, drop a like. It seems like a minor gesture, but that's exactly how this content reaches more people who truly need it. And let me know in the comments, what will be your first stone? What is the habit, the practice, the action you're going to begin today? What is your commitment for the next 120 days? Write it down in the comments. Declaring it publicly as part of the process. And if you enjoyed this video, I invite you to check out one of the videos appearing on your screen right now. You're sure to gain some valuable insight that builds on everything we covered today. Thank you for being here. Until the next video.